So let's just dive right into the first question here. This is one that I would consider fairly easy if I saw it on a test, but let's take a look at why. I'm just going to read it and we're going to think about connotations as we go, but we're just trying to get a general sense of what's going on. In the late 20th century, Italian artist Ludovico Vivitanti created a stir with his avant-garde sculptures that blend machines with living organisms. This blank of man-made technology in the natural world is exhibited in one of his best-known works, Mechanical Bloom, which features a complex assembly of gears and cogs that bloom like a flower in slow motion. So I did pick up on a few things here. There are some positive words. Avant-garde is usually positive, best, usually positive. So maybe my dumb summary is that this is vaguely positive, but it's not super strong. That's not great. I'd love it to be like really clear what it is. But I can also dumb summarize the answer choices, and these have clear connotations for most of them. Triumph, definitely positive. Denunciation, you might not know what that means, but it is negative. Skepticism is negative. Fusion, harder to say, more neutral, but that's not really at all what I notice about this passage, okay? So of all the things that we've talked about so far, the most important thing that I'm gonna use is the word this, which seems like a nothing word, but in these vocab questions, the word this is often used to indicate repetition. So we're going to say something in that first sentence, and then in the second, we're gonna refer back to it and repeat a similar idea. So this is really helpful when we're trying to capture in a very dumb way what a passage is saying. So now I'm looking back at that first sentence and I'm looking for something that stands out, that matches with what's going on in the blank, that repeats something that's coming up later. And I noticed the word blend. Okay, so here's the symmetry. This person, Ludovico, his sculptures blend machines with living organisms. So this blending of the man-made technology in the natural world, blah, 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 right? It's basically the exact same situation. We're blending machines and living organisms. We're blending technology and the natural world. Don't get clever here. Just be dumb. Stick to what they're saying. And once we do, the answer is obvious here. It's definitely fusion, because a fusion is a mixture, a blending of things. So it's very obvious that's what we wanted. And so this is the power of a dumb summary. It lets us capture something complicated in a very simple way. But notice that in order to do that, we needed to understand the structure of this passage, the fact that they were repeating something. I also want to talk about choice A, because I think a lot of people will pick that because it does make sense. And this is often something we're contending with on these vocab questions, is a lot of the wrong answers make perfect sense in the blank. But we need evidence that the answer is right. It's not just good enough for something to kind of sound okay in the blank. It needs to have some sort of proof that it's the right word, right? So this triumph of man-made technology in the natural world is exhibited in this best known work. Well, okay, maybe it's a really cool thing. I don't know, it sounds pretty cool the way they describe it, but I need some sort of evidence that it is a triumph. And avant-garde and best, that was just two weakly positive words. That's not enough to justify something being triumphant. I really want a similar word to that. And so when we are trying to figure out what goes in these blanks, what word is going to be our right answer, it's not enough for it to make sense, to sound good. We need evidence and proof that it's right, and dumb summaries will help us find that. Let's look at another question that's very similar. Once again, if I saw this, I would instantly be like, oh, this is going to be an easy one, because I see the colon in the middle there, and colons are another way of showing repetition. In the grammar section, we talk about colons a lot, and basically what they do is you have the first sentence, the first part, and that is setting up or introducing some idea in the second part. So of course, there's going to be repetition. It's a setup. So as I'm reading, again, I'm thinking about connotation, but I'm also thinking about what is the relationship between these two pieces? Is there anything that jumps out as being repetitive? So let's take a look. Dr. Xanthi Miranda's groundbreaking research on the ancient people of Bactria blanked the previous consensus. Her analysis included compelling challenges to ideas about how the nomadic tribes organized themselves into a vast empire with a complicated trade network. So okay, it's weird because the blank is in the first part, but we can look to the second part to find it, and one word jumps out to me, challenges, right? So if we flip it and do the second part first, her analysis included compelling challenges. So her research challenged the previous consensus, right? Again, we're stealing a word that's already there because we know we need this repetition. So my dumb summary includes that word. So we talked about dumb summaries as being connotations, but it's really also just this simple word. If we can boil this whole idea down to one word, that's pretty dumb, but that's pretty effective. And I'm also thinking about connotations with a word like challenge because it's a clearly negative word. But when I look at the answer choices, I've got some negativity there as well. And I've got some harder choices than before. So this is one where maybe knowing vocab is going to help us. So hopefully you've heard of some of these words before. If you have, then maybe try your best to get rid of the ones that you know and that you know that they don't work. So maybe like concealed is where you would start. To conceal is to hide something. So we're not hiding a consensus. A consensus is like a bunch of people agreeing on something. So how do you hide that? That doesn't really make sense. So there's no reason that would fit. Sabotaged is a little closer. It's probably a word you've heard at some point, but hopefully you have a sense that it's not quite the right fit either. And I'll get into why in a little bit, but if you can just kind of feel that it doesn't fit, that's probably good enough for now. And then from there, maybe you have a sense of subverted or beseeched. Beseeched, is that negative? I don't really know. But if you don't know the words, you do have to just pick something and move on. But if you study, then this question is obvious. I have a good vocabulary, and I know for sure that subverted is a perfect fit here. And this is going to come with practice. This is why vocabulary is back on the SAT, and it is something that you can put the time into to improve your vocabulary and the words you know. So just to get the process started for you, subvert means to undermine, to go against, to work against something, maybe to attack it a little bit. So it does make sense here. Something's being challenged, it is being subverted, overturned, and so it makes sense that we are subverting an idea or a consensus. Beseech has nothing to do with anything. It means to beg, and there's nothing here about begging, so it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Conceal, we said, is hide, but look at that word sabotage, right? It also means to undermine, right? The same thing as subvert. So what is going on? How can subvert be right and sabotage be wrong if they mean the same thing? That doesn't seem to make sense. Well, this just gets into another layer of difficulty that we have to contend with for the vocabulary questions. We can read the dictionary, and we will find very often words that have basically the exact same meaning. But it does not mean that they have the exact same usage. Words can have similar definitions, but that does not mean that they can be used interchangeably. There are subtle differences that matter. The context matters. And so here, that's what's happening. You can subvert an idea. You can subvert a belief. You can't sabotage one, though. Sabotage is a word I associate with like a spy breaking into like the bunker, the missile silo, and then hacking into the mainframe and programming it so it doesn't go off. It's about secrecy and trickery. It just doesn't work to sabotage an idea. You can sabotage someone's plans, but you really can't sabotage their beliefs. So that's something that maybe you knew just by kind of experiencing this word. And that's going to be the challenge with things like this. Between A and D, you might know the definitions well enough to know that they could work, but then by getting experience with the English language, you will be able to know those little subtle differences in usage that could make the difference on a hard question. It's frustrating, especially if English is not your first language, because these are not things that can easily be, memorized or looked up. They are things that kind of just come with experience. So you have to be patient, but it will get easier as you practice. And we can learn new words. Let me kind of just go quickly through how I would do that, and hopefully it can help you too. The best thing to do is to kind of keep a notebook or a document, or maybe use one of those flashcard apps to just kind of keep track of words as you encounter them. So right away, if you encounter a new word in your life, on your SAT, in a book that you're reading, whatever, write it down, look it up, try to get it into your brain right away. And when you do that, try to focus on things that are going to be easy to memorize first. So notice here I use the word denunciation, which we saw in passage 1 or the first question. And the first thing I would note is the connotation. If a word has a clear positive or negative connotation, associate that with the word, right? That's going to be a very easy way to sort through things quickly on questions without even needing the definition necessarily. So it's not always going to work. Not every word has a clear connotation, but if a word does, you really want to get that down first. Then when you're thinking about a definition, keep it simple, 4 words or less. You can't go on and on. A dictionary might, because a dictionary is trying to be like complete and get the full definition of the word. You can't stick all that in your brain though. You need something very quick. Maybe just a word or two even can capture the definition in a useful way. You should also write down some sort of sample sentence. I got mine from dictionary.com. Maybe you get it from the book that you're reading where you've encountered the word, but you want to get something that's going to capture the usage. This is not really something to memorize, but it is hopefully going to put the word in some sort of context to help you memorize it and understand it. But also you want to keep track of any other words that kind of fit the same format, right? So denunciation is a noun, but the more common version of that word is the verb denounce. And so if you can kind of link those together in your book or in your notes, then you can learn 2 words for the price of 1. So we want to try to kind of minimize the memorization we have to do, but yes, we are going to need to do some memorization to improve our SAT scores. But honestly, the way that the SAT does these vocab questions, it's not as much about the words as it is about the passages. And so the difficulty can be increased not by having hard words, but by having a weird structure to your passage. So let's just dive right into this one, and I think you'll see what I mean. Recent evidence suggests that the stomach enzyme H12 functions primarily in humans to blank proteins before they reach the intestines. To preserve these nutrients so that they are digested more slowly, food chemists add small quantities of peptides, which bond with H12's amino receptors, blocking the enzyme from connecting with protein chains. Okay, what's my dumb summary? I have no idea. This is a bunch of science jargon. I have no idea what's going on. So this is not one where I would have a clear sense of what I'm looking for. However, I can dumb summarize the choices pretty easily. Dismantle is negative, insulate and safeguard, both positive. Identify is more neutral, right? It could be good or bad depending on the context. So that's something. But I'm also kind of looking for, anything I can latch onto from this passage, any strong word that really carries a lot of punch that can be helpful for understanding what's happening. And the word that sticks out most to me is the word preserve, okay? Now, we do have some words that mean preserve, right? It's nice that word preserve is right kind of at the changeover between the 2 sentences. So that makes those choices B and C very tempting. But if I keep reading that sentence, I also notice there's this shift going on. To preserve the nutrients, the proteins, we're going to block the enzyme. So that just seems weird. It kind of suggests a little bit of a contrast, right? If blocking the enzyme preserves the proteins, then for the sentence that comes before it that talks about what the enzyme does, we're probably going to want to contrast, right? So this is where you got to be really smart and clever, and where the dumb summary really helps us kind of just like understand this complexity. If blocking the enzyme preserves the proteins, then what does the enzyme itself do? It probably unpreserves the proteins, which is probably about as dumb as a dumb summary can get, because that's not even a word. But notice it's capturing the contrast in an effective way. And so it's giving me something to think about. And once I've got that, the answer is actually really obvious. Dismantle, right? Dismantle means to take apart, and preserve means to kind of keep something together. So there's my obvious contrast. And that word is not hard. The words in B and C and D are not very hard, but the structure of this thing is very difficult because it's just hard to even understand what they're going for. But if we make that our task to go and understand the structure, then the vocabulary piece might be much easier. And so you have to kind of treat these vocab questions not just as about the definitions of words, but about the structure of the passage and looking for contrast that might not be obvious, but might be all that we need to understand the correct answer. Let's do one more with a very kind of difficult structure here. Again, I'm going to dive right in. It may not be blank to film people in public without their consent, but many have expressed concern about social media trends that involve filming or photographing unsuspecting individuals to exploit their image and attract unwanted attention. In fact, some have gone so far as to recommend that laws be changed to protect bystanders from the potential harm of unwittingly going viral. Well, there's some obvious negativity in this kind of middle part here, right? And so my dumb summary is definitely going to include that, right? That's right after the blank, so it's probably important. However, I also notice this kind of little structural word. There's a but right there between our blank and all this negativity, and but is a contrast word. So it probably means that before all the negative, I need some sort of positive to set that up, right? That's how a contrast works. There's a shift of some kind. So a positive to negative, that makes sense. And if I look at the answer choices, prohibited is negative, but permissible, inviting, these are positive. Mandatory is a little trickier. I'm not quite sure about that one, but permissible, inviting, that sounds pretty tempting. But then I notice, wait a minute, right before the blank is the word not, which is negative. So what the heck is going on? Why is there a negative word in this area of the sentence where it's supposed to be positive? Why would that be? Well, it's because the SAT is messing with the structure here, and it's trying to get us get it off the scent of the correct connotation. So think back to math class, right? If we have a negative, but we want a positive, well, two negatives make a positive. So we want our blank to be negative because then they'll kind of cancel each other out. It's a double negative to make a positive connotation that we're looking for. And once I've got that puzzle figured out, it's obvious that choice A is the answer, right? It's the only negative word. And it makes sense here, right? It may not be prohibited, it may not be forbidden to film people in public, but it's a bad idea because people are going to hate you, right? So it does make sense once we've got it. But wow, the structure of this thing, right? That's such a weird way to make this point. But the SAT is not interested in writing the best, most clear sentence. They're interested in making sure that you are paying attention to what's going on. So yes, we need to learn vocab, but the dumb summary here really helped us understand the connotations and then the structure of this thing. We were able to recognize some negatives, we understood there was a contrast, and then we were able to think about negatives and positives together to get that idea that we really needed. It's very tricky, but with practice, if you're hunting for this specifically and using dumb summaries effectively, you can really do a great job on some very hard vocabulary questions. So let's just review this pretty quickly. So as I said, make sure you use dumb summaries. Try to stick to connotations as much as possible. If you can get a specific word to fit in that blank, that's even better. But whatever you're doing, you should pay attention to words that might not seem important, but indicate the structure of what we're reading, right? This and colons suggest repetition. A word like but is going to be a contrast. But this is not a finite list. There's lots of ways that they can express different structures. So we got to be on our toes and be open-minded about different things that could show up. And there are going to be weird things like double negatives that seem to kind of break the mold. So just be aware of where you are. They do, if you're in that hard module, you probably will have some weirder connotations. Regardless, though, what is in your control is that you can learn new vocabulary words to make your life easier with these, because the more words you know, the fewer question marks, and that lets you focus all of your time and effort on the structure and connotation of the passage, so that when you know what's going on in the passage, you already know enough words to just perfectly pick the right one.